Criminal defense attorney Alexandra Kazarian to dive deeper into all of this. Alexandra, what are the implications of this trial for both Tory and Megan? Do either of them stand to lose anything from the eventual verdict?
Megan doesn't really have anything to lose. She's the victim in this case. I guess essentially if she lost the criminal trial, if she were looking to sue him in civil court, it could make it a little bit harder, or it could actually make it a little bit easier for Tory to argue that he was not culpable in civil court if he was found not guilty in criminal court. But I don't see her actually looking to sue him. And I don't think that would necessarily be a loss. So I guess as far as Megan is concerned, I know that one of the things that's really been bothering her, something that she's been very vocal about, is the public view of her as a victim in this case. So if she were to lose, I think that the critics of hers who've been so mean to her would probably just have such a louder voice. And I imagine it would be really hard for her to deal with if that were to happen. On his end, if he were to lose this case, he has, I believe, at least 3 strikes that he's charged with. So he'd be looking at a sentence as a California third striker where he could be looking at life in prison. And even for just if he was found guilty of just one of the felonies, he'd be looking at some significant prison time, not just local jail time, but prison time. And it's a serious and violent felony, which means that he would be looking at serving 85% of the time that he's sentenced to. So his liberty really is at issue here.
We heard some of it yesterday in the trial, but there's been talk of bribery of witnesses on Tory's side, and as you kind of mentioned, talk of lying on Megan's side. From what you've seen so far, is there any way a jury will be able to accurately decide on a guilty verdict?
Well, that's exactly the role of a jury. That's exactly their job, is to determine who's lying, who's telling the truth, and if they can, come to a verdict. And if they can't all agree that this witness is credible, and so we're going to use that evidence against the defendant, if they can't all agree, then that's where you get these mistrials. That's where you get a hung jury, and either the case gets tried all over again, and the prosecution takes that information and uses it to try to strengthen their case, or the defense takes it and tries to figure out how to discredit those witnesses so that they can try to get a not guilty verdict in the future. But that's exactly the role of the jury.
And so when cases like this involve 2 people like Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion, who are celebrities, how difficult is it to find a jury who can separate that?
You know, I honestly think when it comes down to it, when jurors get in that box and they take that oath and they vow that they are going to put all of those preconceived notions aside, I do think jurors are actually really good at that. I know we've seen these, these trials that become these spectacles, and they come to some kind of a decision that the general public just doesn't understand. How could OJ have been found not guilty, things like that. But I think when it comes down to it, really, if you dissect those cases, it's because the evidence was problematic. You have, in the OJ case, you had chain of custody issues, and sometimes jurors do hold on to that because they have to take every single piece of evidence and really dissect it. So I do think that it's harder for celebrities to get a fair trial when you're a defendant and when you're a victim, because there is just so much other chatter, and there's a fear that the jury could get confused by what's actually been brought into court as evidence and what's being spoken about outside. But I do think jurors generally do a good job of taking that oath and taking it very seriously and saying, you know what, I've heard that, but I'm not going to consider it.
Thanks so much for talking with us, Alexandra.
You're welcome, anytime.